Precisely 7 o'clock. Any adjustments to the agenda?
I'll just say, you got your fall TMTP academic report last month. I just wasn't here. You just have spring VTCAP data report.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't actually do anything with that data last month because Andra wasn't here either.
You
And
mean Anda.
I never can say it right.
Andra wasn't here
I
either.
want to change you guys' names. It's
That
good
is
enough
not
having two
included in
Jamies.
this current report.
Jamie.
Anyway, yeah, so.
Some
okay,
of it
that's
is
fine.
in here.
We did, we went over it a little bit.
Yeah. We skimmed it.
We skimmed everything else.
Anything else, adjustment? Okay, public comment. Hey, Chris, you're it. You want to
Yeah.
comment?
Yeah, I had a couple comments.
Okay.
So the first one, maybe speaking from all parents, and I think I even had the comment back when I was on the board, is we have the original enrollment paperwork for the school. That it takes us time to put all that together, give it to the school. And it has everything checked off that a kid will need for the year. If they go to the nurse, what can be prescribed. It talks about field trips and, everything. But yet, once that's turned in, we still have forms that come home all the time. Basically, like you get a copy of the same information that's sent back to the school. My daughter got a call. I got a call from my daughter last week, from the nurse, like, can we give her Tums? And I'm like, I filled that paperwork out. Like, yeah, you can give her Tums. And they're like, well, we don't get a copy of that. So it's like, I don't know where the disconnect is, but even the field trip stuff is on the initial paperwork. So why do we need an individual field trip every single time it comes home? And not to mention, then you got to fill out your insurance and all that stuff all over again. So it's like, why can't we just, give copies to everybody that needs it, or why all this unnecessary extra paperwork? And then the second comment I have, or concern that I have, is, so the VPA allowed or did a change this year for coaches to allow to be during school time, excluding summer, to allow coaches that are, let's say a basketball coach that's not during basketball season, that they can continue to work with their students. And I know in the past, it's always been kind of a, the old rule was if you're in school and out of season, then you can't coach your sport, only in summertime. So, and the challenges they had in the old days was that coaches were bending the rules and finding every little way to make these, structured practices that aren't supposed to be structured. And, I've been talking to a bunch of my colleagues, and it's happening in all the schools, but not just here. But, Oxbow's been practicing for 2 weeks in girls basketball. Won't call them practices. But so the concern I have is the open gym policy. Open gym is supposed to be an unstructured event that students, doesn't necessarily even have to be a student that wants to participate in that sport, but maybe they just want to go and play basketball and shoot hoops. They're not getting into trouble. They just want to go in and shoot hoops. But we can't right now because it's quote unquote, it's being kind of a structured practice, even though it's not. Like these kids are going, the last practice that they had there, or open gym they had there, kids were literally like doing shuttle runs most of the time. Like, that's not an unstructured open gym establishment. And what it's doing on twofold is, one, there are some kids that want to go take advantage of the gym that aren't using it because they don't want to go and run shuttle runs half the practice. They would rather just go in and shoot hoops. And then there are other kids that are like, I just want to come in and shoot hoops, and now I'm being told I got to run shuttle runs the whole time. And, and if you look up the VPA's policy, it's very, very easy to see it. It talks about the new ones, but at the end it says operating open gyms that are unstructured and generally open to all. So it's keywords, is unstructured. You're allowed to provide voluntary skills and drills, instructions to students enrolled in the school. But you're not, so these coaches now are doing, unstructured practices early. I was a coach, but like, we can bend the rules a little bit, but this is kind of going pretty far at this point. So I don't know what we can do at school better to you know, I know it's kind of one of those things like, well, Oxbow's doing it, so we're kind of doing it, like everybody's kind of doing it. Maybe VPA needs to just go back and say, all right, we're cutting bait here, but it doesn't seem like it's very fair to the coaches. And then on the other part of that, the challenge that we have directly here at our school is that we do not have the proper audit or non-bias piece to this puzzle. So like in basketball season, for instance, is, you know, everything runs under the athletic director, but when the athletic director is also one of the coaches, you know, that person is now, you kind of lose your audit trail of, you know, hey, I'd like to do this today. No, you really can't do that. But if you're a coach as well, you're kind of more apt to say, yeah, we're going to do that. So just kind of some things to bring to mind. I know my daughter's one of them, and there's other kids right now that would like to use the open gym that aren't using it just because they don't want to go on and run the whole time. And there are kids that are in there running the whole time that don't want to run all the time. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the board, and I don't know what we can do better there to make it easier for the kids going forward.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
That's something that you guys can address at some point, not now necessarily, but especially the paperwork thing. I remember that from when you were on the board, that, yeah, we had people coming to us and saying, why are we filling this out over and over again? So, thank you. I don't see any other public. Hi, Julie, glad to see you. Approve the minutes from October 21st.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Any correspondence? Yes, not. And board comment?
I think the only thing I was just gonna, but it's sort of at 9/1 anyways, nothing to there, so.
Okay. Celebration of learning.
This month's celebration of learning is my privilege. While Calvin brings that up, I want to tell you this for why I chose this topic. One of the pieces of the gifts of feedback from a recent community conversation we had in South Royalton was a parent who made a very valid point that there are ways we talk about flexible pathways and opportunities in the middle school, but we don't do a really great job advertising that to the whole. What that creates is lots of potential, but that requires advocacy on some part. Either we're trying to meet an individual need or a parent specifically is advocating for a change, and I'll highlight one in a moment. What that down the road leads to is our take on what a middle school plan of study can look like. Different pathways through the school, descriptions of classes, being better about advertising what are the opportunities you can have here, both for the piece of recruitment, but also much clearer communication about what a parent can expect from us or work with us to create for their child. So with that in mind, as the qualifier, I'd like to highlight where we are with flexible pathways in our middle school this year. We do have a new person in that position, new to that position, but not new to the industry. We hired a person with a couple of decades of experience teaching, and she chose the two pictures there, both the path one can walk and also the incredible flexibility required sometimes to get a student on the right path. Next slide, please. I won't pretend that you can read that font from where you are. I know I cannot, even with progressives on, so I'll highlight some of the things. In talking about what the program should look like this year, both what we nurture from what's already been built, but look to grow and add, gave a couple of directives that Ms. Cara Edmonds and I agreed on right off the bat. We wanted the public-facing side of Flexible Pathways to have far more of a component of community service, of some projects that were being done had an impact on the school, the community, and beyond. A rider to that was looking at our colleagues in the elementary school and the wonderful work they've done with people like Francie, Regeneration Corps, all those various community organizations. I asked Cara to really start taking in. In this particular case, another directive I gave her was really Looking at the arc from 6th, 7th, and 8th leading to the capstone, we wanted to work in career exploration with a wide variety of people. And what you see there is where she started. If the theme accompanying her work was, how does our work, our projects, how does that give back to the community? She started with those who respond in the community. Medical professionals, a veterinarian. Next slide, please. We had a fire truck come over. Who doesn't like to climb on a fire truck? But the topic of that conversation was really the kind of training that goes into, the kind of lifestyle one adopts when they become a volunteer fire person. The kinds of pathways those people walk, in addition to being a first responder. Talked about possibilities in the future of pursuing EMS kinds of careers and having students take CPR training. That's what that conversation was going into. Next one, please. And we also brought in some LEOs, law enforcement officers, in this case, a state trooper, who again, talked to them about the preparation that goes into that kind of career path, not just as a citizen, but also as a student. The variety of careers that lead to that moment can come through military, can come through academic preparation, or police academy in Vermont. One, please. And on these next slides, highlighting an example of, in addition to those first responders, bringing in all kinds of different perspectives, people that have eclectic mixes of talent that could lend art, start tying into forestry, landscape management. Please. We had an airline pilot come in that has worked as a pilot on a lot of different levels of our society, both in the military, commercial, private, and talk to them about it's more than just the video game experience of flying the plane, the preparation, the mental fortitude, the resilience, tied into how you have to take care of yourself mentally, physically, to be fit to be in that position. Talk a lot about his path and his growth into a whole different kind of career field that they might not be exposed to. We've also had, we brought in mechanics to talk about the increasingly technical nature of car repair. One of the things we highlighted is we're kind of at a turning point. My mechanic, the one I rely on, brilliant person, can fix just about anything, including German engineered cars like my wife has, but has been pretty frank. When it comes to EVs, I'm too late in my career to invest in that kind of technology. I can't afford six-figure overhauls to my garage and the technical knowledge. So in talking to this mechanic, it's about how, talk about lifelong learning, you have to be a very good automotive repair person. We've also had loggers come in and talk about how they are turning to more sustainable practices, the various kinds of knowledge you have to have akin to agricultural, where when something breaks in the middle of nowhere, you're the one fixing it. So you have to know how to do hydraulic repair, engine repair, how to use leverage, all kinds of concepts they learned earlier on. Next one, please. And just some highlights of how they are giving back on this campus, learning about how to, forgive the pun, dig into some of the projects that had been started, looking at raised beds, trying to understand beautification, but also tying some academic knowledge to it of how are parks planned, how are landscapes planned, how are companion plants chosen. Next one, please. And at the heart of it is a lot of collaboration with their other essentials teachers as well, with a focus on community. Quite often after a project is given back, there's an intentional coming back as a community that overlaps with some of the skills we do in outdoor ed, fire starting, cooking over the fire, simple things that are community building. Next one, please. Again, just some of the projects that are going on all around the school. I'd like to point out that pavilion gets used frequently as a meeting spot, as a place for projects, as a jumping off point for where they go off into campus. Next one, please, Calvin. So again, looking at a lot of projects right now, the big question is with snow on the ground, what do those projects look like? So evolving into the next phase of what beautification around the school looks like. So please. So those things you may already know about, although they are evolutions of time. Some of the things we have found are pathways that we had not tried before. In this case, we had 4 of our middle school students participate in football in Woodstock. Had a fairly split season, successful for those 4 boys though. It required a lot of flexibility in the afternoon. And it did raise questions. I mean, it's on all pages and ponies. With every new opportunity, often comes new questions you have to ask. How to keep these 4 young men up on their academics or fill in gaps when they're missing some class time at the end of the day. Leads to conversations about what we do for the track athletes or soccer or basketball or any of the other programs that we have. Looking at these flexible pathways to bolster that academic content that they might be missing. Thank you. So rather than read that to you, tying up where we're headed, what we represented there are projects and approaches that are going to be the things we kind of celebrate, that are affecting a wide variety of students, that are for whole groups at a time, and as it builds into exploration of interest in 7th grade and capstone in 8th grade, those pieces continue to grow, but what we're finding is that the ways we really need to advertise are the one-offs, the small, really individualized, specialized kinds of pieces of attention. An example, a parent advocated for a different experience for their child who wasn't into specific community service project they were doing and asked to use that time instead to pursue their own independent study in Chinese. That's wonderful. So we have to be thinking about how we create those opportunities in more than just the class slot a student has signed up. Through flexible pathways and management of students in that program, we have more than 6 who are taking algebra in 8th grade. We have some that are taking now their 2nd semester of Spanish, having already blitzed through the 1st semester. So looking to fill gaps, holes, interests in a one-off, but again, driving the conversation about what's the next step. The next step is how to create more of those opportunities throughout the school day, especially now that we're building more and more collaboration with teaching teams. So in a nutshell, that's where Flexible Pathways has grown, both for the individual and for the group, and we look forward to its next evolution. And again, tying back to the qualifier at the beginning, if this is one of our crown jewels and one of the things we should be continually celebrating, we need to do a better job advertising what those possibilities are and not relying in some cases on an informed parent to say, hey, can my kid do this? Rather being upfront with, this is what your child can do. What other possibilities do you see? Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get into the reports, I realized we probably should be introducing our new student reps. So, Jordan and Anna.
No, Jack and Abby.
Oh, Jack and Abby. Okay, I always want to call you Jordan. Okay, so I was debating in my mind, Jack, Jordan. Okay,
Okay. Close
so,
enough.
okay. Jack and Amy.
Abby.
Abby, I mean, yeah. Anna is your sister.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I got the right family anyways, yeah. And why don't we all introduce ourselves too, so that they know who we are. Let's start with Peggy.
I'm Peggy Ainsworth, I'm in South Royalton.
I'm Ed Sullivan in South Royalton.
The Ed Sullivan, yeah.
Jimmy Daniel, Bethel.
Nancy Pejui, Bethel.
Dave Dumais, South Royalton. You probably know my wife Adrian from the front desk.
Oh, yeah.
We've met.
Julie.
Hi, Julie Hinman, Bethel.
I'm Gail Obama, I'm middle school principal here. Nice to meet you.
They know you, yeah, they know you. Okay, great. Okay, reports to the board, starting with superintendent.
So you have my report. I worked on the 3rd draft of the strategic plan today. You'll board packet for the WRBSU board meeting. Based on feedback received, I think we're in a pretty good place. There has been a suggestion to tweak our vision statement at the SU level. So I included that in my actual written report. The current version will still be in the strategic plan. It'll be up for conversation as possible action at the meeting next Tuesday. The high school in Royalton campus elementary is going to be hosting the Senate Education Committee. I will provide some clarity that we are hosting, right? Meaning we didn't get to decide when public comment got to be. It's going to be in the afternoon from 2:30 to 4:30. It's not convenient, but we're the host. And they said this is when public comment's going to be. So I try to clarify that for people. Like, we want folks to come. I understand the timing is not great. There will be a virtual option and an opportunity to be there in person. We're working out the logistics of that. We will have a student panel that will be representative of students from our high school, but the SU in general. Also a teacher panel, same way, from teachers across the SU. Year 3 principals will be on a panel with Principal Stetson. And then I'll be interviewed for about 15 minutes, and then they're gonna tour the school for an hour as well and just ask questions. They're also gonna be in the lunchroom for 45 minutes to informally connect with students. And then there'll be a 2-hour opportunity for public comment. I'll get into why this will be important when I get under Act 73, under the discussion items. And then I just want to highlight, as you come into your budget draft, you're going to see student support increase some, and that is because this was me proposing just to engage in conversation around, when I first came on as superintendent, we were in a deficit spend mode, and we're in pretty much a financial crisis. We were struggling with having enough cash on hand, frankly, to make payroll. And so at that point, I recommended that the board not replace an outgoing elementary principal to help try to fill that gap. Also, it had become clear to me as I started to analyze our 2 campuses that we had two elementary schools that were not working in conjunction together. Meaning, example, we had one campus had 3 different math programs happening, but they were separate from another campus's math program, right? We had different approaches to literacy instruction across the 2 elementary schools. This idea being we're a unified district, but there's nothing unified in regards to coming to the unified middle school. And so I felt it was really important that we come under the umbrella of one principal at that elementary level to bring our buildings together, even if we were separate. Also, we engaged in this community engagement task force, of which you'll see there was mixed feedback in regards to pursue whether or not we change the structural change to the district, because there had been talk at the board level about, did it make more sense to have a unified elementary on one campus and a middle high school on another? Okay, that data wasn't necessarily clear. If you looked at the different levels in regards to your teachers, I think that you would see that most of the feedback was fairly positive at the elementary and possibly the high school, but middle school had some concern about that. In the communities, I think it felt like one community might be more open to that idea than another community. There's also this piece within your, and it's important for you to know, in regards to your articles of agreement around the merger, you can actually move your middle school or your high school to another campus without a vote of the town, but you can't move your elementary students to another campus without the vote of the town. As a board, you could actually do that. But like, if you as a board decide you wanted to flip the middle and high school students, that could just happen. But you cannot move either one of your community's elementary students without a vote of the town. That is going to impact. And it requires a super majority vote of the board, not just a majority of the board, like in Robert's rules, to even warn this vote. Okay? So with all that said, I wanted to just have you see this idea of what a 4th principal would do to your budget, which it's significant in your student support. But I thought it was worth us talking about publicly, because if we could financially make that work, I actually think it would best serve our teachers, staff, allow for your principals to be instructional leaders on each campus, meaning at the elementary level. Not that Principal Bowen's not doing these things, but it was never my intent to keep her going across 2 campuses forever. And she's doing it already now in year 6. And so I would just say with that comes challenges at times. And so I just wanted to put that out there in my report to kind of give some context around this paragraph and what you've seen in budget when we talk about the budget later tonight.
I have a question about the budget, but not about that, whenever you're ready for it. I don't want to interrupt.
No, I'll take any questions folks may have, yeah.
Through coincidence, I know that some FTE was moved from Waterman that was initially, and then we needed it somewhere else. Was there a para? that
Yeah,
was
those
moved?
paras are not your employees, meaning RUDs,
They're not RUDs,
they're SU employees.
they're SU employees. Okay. No, all right, so
The
it's a
water
bigger,
program is an SU funded program.
so I'll come to the SU, the next SU meeting, and I'll ask about this.
Yep.
But I think you see what I was
Well, I
inquiring
mean,
about, but.
if we try to triage if we're short-staffed, meaning if
No,
we have
I know
a,
what happened. I was gonna talk to you about where we could maybe squeeze, but if it's an SU conversation,
yeah,
yeah,
it's an SU conversation, yep.
that's cool.
But I mean, frankly, we're maneuvering paras around the SU.
I know.
Okay, any other questions for Jamie? Okay, who's up first?
Do you want to go over or you want me to start?
Doesn't matter, go ahead.
Okay, start by highlighting things from the principal's report. Sounds good. We have now, Andrew, myself, and some of the other administrators have now participated in 2 sessions with EL, the curriculum we're using in our ELA classrooms. These trainings are specifically designed to get us to know what we're actually looking for, how to give a constructive feedback within the veins of how the lesson is structured. There's a lot of focus on how we unpack the lesson walking in. And we were challenged to get some of those observations in earnest done before Thanksgiving break. And we are on pace. We're seeing things specifically through their lens and looking at how to improve that instructional content. And the teachers are unpacking, looking for ways they can bring their own flavor in and make it fit within our community. How do these things tie to whole school read? How do we engage with literature across the spectrum? How do we generalize some of those lessons outside of ELA classrooms into global sit? So we're at that point of growth in our own learning. Excuse me. As far as capstone projects go, we agree on the point of now having a time frame. Students have done interest surveys already. We're at the point of signing up or aligning student interest to mentor, for lack of a better word, adults with some content knowledge or area of expertise that can help guide the projects. And we are just for way down the road, we are looking to have our presentations around the same time as the spring conference window. So we're looking for that. I'll stop there.
So, yeah, all that, and I would say elementary is same thing with the EL. We're on the same pace with the capstone projects. My 3 highlights, one is Tiffany Bates, who came and presented our last board meeting, just got a $5,000 grant, which we're so happy for her. And she is not just going to focus on the trout, but figure out how to weave that into sustainability and climate action. So she is moving and shaking, and I'm thinking there'll be another celebration of learning at the end of this year connected to that grant, $5,000. But she's very excited. The second thing I would say is we had our first of 2 feasts that Nisha Johnson, our food service head honcho, puts on. She puts on so much food, and we had over 100 people come to this campus for the elementary alone. And if you didn't get to make that, December 11th, I believe it is at Royalton. So please come. They're wonderful. It's nice to see families sitting down and breaking bread. And our only biggest problem is there's so many people, it's just getting them all through the line. So it's a wonderful problem to have. And it was just a good feel-good event. And Joe Bertoloni did the book fair in conjunction. So people ate, people wanted to spend money. It was lovely. It was a good feeling. Next day. And I think our last highlight that I would highlight is just our community partners that helped us do our relocation drill. I think on both campuses, they went off without a hitch. And so I'm thankful to our first responders who always show up and help us do that. And it's a yucky thing to have to practice, but I think our kids have done such a good job just flexing and they know what to do. And I think the more we normalize it, the easier it'll be if we ever have to really face anything like having to leave our school and not come back. So it went well, it was good weather, and those are my 3 celebrations.
So a few highlights from my board report. I spoke about Playful, this new online app that we have at the high school to provide social emotional learning. And that has a built-in social emotional screener in it. And we get our initial data from that, and it shows that 69% of our students are at risk for anxiety and depression. That number is pretty high, but doesn't really surprise me. And when you dig into that a little more deeply, 5% of those are kind of fall in the severe to moderate risk range. So it just shows you a little bit of what our students are bringing into the school building each day. Look forward to continuing to utilize that that platform for journaling activities, social emotional learning, and other things through our advisory program. And we'll have winter data as well coming up shortly. Our leadership team has been planning professional development coming up for the remainder of the year, focusing in on some data points that we pulled out of our grassroots data and looking for content areas, teachers to help us develop some strategies that we can implement across all classrooms to support some of those gaps in learning that we see come up through the data. And lastly, we participated in the First Branch informational night last week up in Chelsea. That's for eighth graders from First Branch who are looking at what schools they want to go to. And I'm just super pleased that we had 4 high school faculty members, we had 2 varsity coaches, and 3 students ambassadors that were there representing White River Valley. So it was a strong showing, and it's always great to just be able to watch our students in action. And they really were the highlight of the evening, and having an opportunity to hear them talk about our school with such passion and clarity was just amazing. So grateful for the participation. And I guess I can slide into the VCAP stuff. Information that's also there. Science continues to be a real strength for the district. So you see that we're solidly ahead of where much of the rest of the state of Vermont is in terms to for those scores. And math and ELA are right about state average, plus or minus a few percentage points, which also remains pretty consistent.
Yeah, I think this is always hard data to respond to because we get so late from when the kids actually did the assessments. But I think our takeaway, leadership team and our data teams is that, it still gives us that every year checkpoint on what we're doing and what we need to focus on. I would also just add a couple kids moving in or going away can change a whole cohort, and that can quickly shift your scores. So our cohorts, when you think about bigger schools, are pretty small. A few kids' scores can make a big difference. But overall, I'm happy to say that it's nice to read, like, achieved in these grades. There's still some work to do. There's a lot of goodness in this.
It seems trite to say, but ditto. I was encouraged by a lot of the trends watching cohorts come up. We have 5 years of data in some of these cases as we look at the specific goals. And you look at each cohort, we are making progress over time for those cohorts. More and more. I mean, the way I'm reading this is fewer and fewer students are at that lowest level of approaching, of winning. And I'm looking at trends across the majority of the seventh grade sample. And we may not be at that benchmark that we've set, but compared to state average, like our recent scores are showing we're making a significant amount of progress in grade 3. But again, that's the same question Andrew's pointed out. When we see a cohort that does not make that same kind of progress or has a spike between years, we have to ask questions. In a class of 40, 2 kids is a statistically significant factor. So asking the right questions is what we take from this data.
I'd also say kudos to Audra, because I don't really know how she is pulling the data from 2 different sources to compare it, but she's a miracle with it.
Any questions?
I mean, are those lower scores, and they're all across different grade levels, are those explainable, or are they isolated?
Which one is?
Like, I'm thinking like grade 3, 7, and 9 all have the star not only below the line, but below the state average for 2025. I'm wondering if, and like I see that 1725 is not that far from 1750, and they're at 1730. But is there any problem that we've identified with those 3 classes? I mean, other than we've always been fighting the battle with the COVID kids, kind of got a little.
I don't know if we can blame it on that. I think just every cohort has a story.
Mhm.
Well,
So it's not one thing, it's.
Or a profile,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Some of what we talked about previously too is when the tests are occurring, how much of the proficiency and how much of that's built into the curriculum, like you can't do it on the last day of school, like that it would almost be more meaningful data that,
I mean, practical application wise, what is a 25-point spread on this? Not anything in terms of applicable knowledge, or does 25 points represent something significant as a difference?
I want to channel Honda and say you're just looking at a 1 standard deviation.
Okay, yep.
But I would not swear to that in a court of law.
No, but I just wanted, in general, I was just like, because.
right, it's a hard scale, it's not like we have a 100% and
Right.
20%.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think specifically, like that 3rd grade cohort, we
Yeah.
need to monitor their growth this year, right? So when we're looking at that TMP data in January, I'm hoping we're seeing some gaps closed.
Right.
If not, I'm sure Andrew can give us a picture of why that may be in regards to the cohort. But those are the questions I'm asking myself as we go into looking at that TMP data.
So all this data says that we need a nudge, not a shove, to get things.
Yeah, and I would say to you, like, and this is what we're watching across the SU, is if our 3rd grade's low again next year, that is where we start to say, do we have a curricular issue? Meaning instructional materials or our expectations are not aligning, right, to those proficiencies. And I can look at that across multiple 3rd grades, right?
And see if they use the same materials or
Yeah,
different.
right.
Yeah.
And we are actually we use EL materials consistently now across the SU, 4 through 8. In 3rd right now, we've got some different instructional materials being used in our different districts, because we've never come at it like we're all doing the same, right? Like we've slowly gotten there as leadership teams have like decided this makes sense.
Right.
But right now in ELA in grade 3, we have some different instructional materials, which I sort of like in the sense that we can track, like, are there some doing better than others? It's part of how we got to EL, is that we were seeing over time our schools using EL, that students were demonstrating, closing gaps and demonstrating increased proficiency versus some of our schools where we weren't providing those materials. And so that's why we went that way. Same with Bridges,
3rd grade is right.
and now we're using it here, but we weren't last year. So we'll see that that's the type of how we need to monitor.
So that still might pay off, because we just made that switch. That might actually provide.
There's always a learning curve, right, with the new program.
Right.
the rigor of EL is most definitely there.
Mm,
When I walk into rooms this year, and I should have highlighted this, across the SU, I see kids engaged in relevant text that is rigorous, and I see more writing happening consistently in rooms versus what we've seen in the past. And I see Andrew shaking her head. I mean, it just, what we're working on right now is rigor's good. Like we can accommodate to get kids there, right? Like we struggle sometimes as educators to see students struggle, but some struggle and perseverance often means that we are actually closing gaps, right? Like it's the accommodations and modifications we provide to get the students there, but it's okay, right, to see it, to see a student have to persevere. I just left another meeting where that's been a real focus of their faculty, and like, how do we increase perseverance among our students? I would say at times across society, because we are so used to getting immediate gratification, right, when we want it. Like, I want a pizza. I don't do this, but what's it called? What do you do?
DoorDash.
DoorDash.
Not that, yeah, DoorDash.
Right, but you can get the pizza, or I just need a ride and I can get an Uber, right? Like, we need to make certain we're working with our students to know that it's not always instant gratification. It'll work.
Great.
And this, I will say, that's one of these things I've always said about these tests, is I do think they assess that. You know, there's some perseverance with these standardized tests, of like, you got to demonstrate some grit.
Yeah.
And I think that testing, that's a good thing. Like, we want to make certain we're instilling some grit. Right, students? Oh, yeah.
You like taking hard tests, right?
But Ed, those are great, those are the types of questions you should be asking yourself, and then that's how you can utilize like this data set as compared to when we show you your winter team.
Right.
We want to see, like, is there some calibration there, we're closing some gaps.
Okay. Anything else from principals or questions for principals? Do we have Tara somewhere?
Tara's still in share, I think, looking at playground bids.
Oh, boy.
Exciting stuff. You guys got me out of that. I must admit, like, that stuff does not really fill my bucket. Don't tell Sharon I said that.
Okay, so we'll skip over business manager and then,
Yeah, you can skip over for now.
Yeah.
And then if she happens to not be here, if you have questions.
okay. Policy committee, updates on policies C-33 and C-34.
Sure, so Jamie passed out the paper copy of the C-33, officially the K through 8 inter and transfer policy. I'm not sure if I had much chance to read it thoroughly, but if when you do, if you have any specific questions, or if you already do, I'm happy to answer sort of how we arrived at language there. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with what this policy is about and where it came from, but we talked about it. I think the first time we talked about it as a group was at the wagon wheel meeting.
Mhm.
And essentially at that point, you know, we had an initial discussion, but we went back with some feedback and really workshopped some of the language, really tried to, what's the right word? Standardize the language, especially as it's referred to, you know, as a transfer and not as the choice program. You know, there's a lot of targeted language to make sure that it's pretty specific in what it's talking about, how it's supposed to be utilized. Did anybody have any concerns or comments or anything like that right off the bat? To give you some more time to look it over. I think Julie's raising her hand.
Julie?
This isn't a concern or question necessarily about the policy, but I just was curious about how the conversations are going about this policy. And if, I think my only big broad concern about it is like, if a lot of kids from the smaller schools want to come to a bigger school, what that does to the dynamics of a small school. So I just was curious how the conversations were going, especially with people from the smaller schools.
Right, so I think a lot of that conversation is happening within policy, but really this is our sort of first opportunity to start hearing some of that feedback, especially from the smaller schools' boards. They're sort of aware of it in the same way that our board has been, but they haven't, had an opportunity to really read it and see what it says, at least, as it currently sits. The concern about, so we try to address, and I couldn't point to the paragraph just right off the cuff, but we do try to address some of that concern, essentially by saying this can't just be, oh, everybody who wants to can whenever, it doesn't matter. There needs to be a consideration for, if you have a third grade class that only has, I'm just making it up, but if they only have 9 kids in it, 2 of them are siblings and they, want to transfer, that could have a huge impact on that class. So those things need to be discussed as part of the sort of application process. It's not just a put your name here and then show up to the other school tomorrow. And there's been several concerns like that, or not several, but a few concerns like that were brought up. We also had some discussion about sort of, frankly, whether this policy was something that really needed to be spelled out in policy. And I think everybody kind of came to the agreement that yes, this shouldn't be something that's just decided. If this is something that we feel is a benefit to our communities and from our structure, that it should be identified. People should know that it is a possibility. And I think that sort of speaks to like the heart of why this policy kind of came to be anyways, was that it's supposed to be helping our community and folks who have a specific need for why this would make sense for their students, or in their family, or et cetera. Julie, I don't know if that sort of answers your question. I think honestly the answer is I think there's going to be a lot more to come at our next policy meeting next week. I think we're going to start hearing some of that feedback. I don't know specifically which board from, but I know we're going to get some feedback next week for sure.
It's actually been positive.
Oh, okay, great.
I've watched every board go through this, and that I think there are at this point a couple board members who have concerns, who are the same ones who have had concerns along, but in general, boards as a whole seem to be supportive.
I think this could go both ways anyways. I can see
It
that
could.
there are some parents that are gonna say, wow, I'd love to have my kid in a really small class instead of 20-kid class or something. And so we might have parents that wanna have them go to the smaller school.
Right, and part of it is too, not just about the schools specifically because they have this or they don't have this or whatnot, but family dynamics or caregivers, this situation, your working situation, it just might make more sense. I'm not in that boat and it doesn't really apply to this situation, but I'm much closer to this campus than I am to South Burlington campus, even though I live in South Burlington. That is not a relevant example, but it is an example, so. Yeah, I think we can see it for
specificity of the criteria are really laid out well. Right. Doesn't seem like anything's missing, that someone would have to sit down and say, okay, do I meet these criteria? Not just, I feel like doing this.
Right.
Right, okay.
Well, and I think that would be part of the process to it, or it would be, not that I think it would be, is that would have to be addressed. They couldn't,
Right.
And they're also, I think we've discussed this previously, but, that there's an annual cap on the participation, sort of also to curb some of that concern, Julie, or not your concern, but about class sizes and that sort of thing. And really administrative burden too, if for some reason, we just get 50 requests. But as was pointed out through this process, it's already a pretty rare occurrence, and I don't see that there would really be a flood of applications simply because this is brought, to policy. So
I'd be very surprised. I would say typically, even when we get to there, often as administrators, we are also in a place of saying a change probably makes sense.
What about C34? What's that one?
So that's not out of committee yet. The essentially is that we should have it next week. Or we should be moving it out of committee, as far as I know, next week. And I'm struggling on the.
It's behavioral threat assessment teams, which we have, required by law. And so the state provided us a model policy on it. We had some changes that the policy committee wanted to make. I made those changes actually today.
I was a pain in his butt.
He was working me hard. The policy committee will review those. And I think, my sense is, having just worked on it today, that they'll get that out on Tuesday.
Yeah, there weren't any major structural changes.
There's
just
nothing
language.
major structural.
Okay, student reps, do you have anything to report? Okay.
So are they gonna be part of the crew now every month, not every week, not every week?
That's the plan.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay, that's great.
And that, it's something that you volunteered for, just out of a sort of interest, is it part of like a curriculum? Hopefully you get some credit, you know, at least a high five.
It's through our school newspaper program, which is one of our seminars that we have every full day Friday. And like we have a section in the school newspaper that's dedicated to this because we thought a big idea to know what goes on at school meetings.
Yeah, very cool.
That's great.
So like we interviewed Mr. Canari over the beginning of October, just going over like Act 73. Talked about the possible merger and a couple other things.
Talked about you coming to meetings.
Yeah, that too.
Told you
It's
that
already
they would want to use you as sounding board sometimes.
Great.
Excellent.
Should have brought copies of the first edition of.
I know, I want to see this.
My-
Yeah, that'd be great.
When was the first edition published?
A week or two ago.
Oh,
I'd like to see it too.
Brilliant. yeah,
You email
okay,
it to me?
Yeah.
And I can get it to the board.
that'd be fantastic.
If you do have questions too, you know, like unofficial, you know, clarifications or that kind of stuff when you're writing those up, or, you know, if you go like, oh, crap, I'm thinking that to ask that while we're at the meeting. I'm sure you can email any of us.
Yeah. Great. Discussion items now, the big one, Act 73 updates.
Is there something going on with that?
So last Monday, I had the privilege to sit through the entire map task force. It was actually, the day flew by because it was a pretty exciting one. I came into there over the weekend. I had seen the CTE map, of which at that point in time, coming into Monday morning, I didn't think that we could have had a better opportunity for us in the sense that we had talked to OSSD, and they actually had trimmed off the Randolph Tech Center to only be OSSD down through RSU, but they added Thetford with us, who's a K6 with choice. And I thought, well, that's probably to capture Thetford Academy within an SU of that region. Well, what also occurred was like districts were going to be forced to merge. So that would have meant White River Unified District would have been forced to merge with OSSD. So the Randolph School District would have been forced to merge and would have created a new district that were both operating K-12s. And other districts within the SU, as example, Thetford would have been forced to merge with Sharon, of which would have been forced to merge with Rochester Stockbridge, who are not even contiguous because they're late operating districts. And so quickly, we came to realize that there was actually a lot of forced merger happening within those CTE regions. And the Burlington CTE map was going to be over 20,000. Like it wasn't good. And so the BOCES proposal that Representative Holcomb had with Superintendent Badams and Dr. Bonsignors came forward. They did remove that. At one point they had a requirement of average daily membership of 500 for an operating district, which would have forced merge all of our other districts other than White River Unified District within the SU. They removed that language and really focused on voluntary mergers and a plan that would articulate voluntary mergers over the upcoming 10 years, and a real emphasis on utilizing boards of centralized educational services, BOCES, laying on top of SUs and SDs. And so if you actually look at, they're proposing 5 BOCES, which actually mirror the governor's original school district, supervisory districts. But would still give autonomy to districts and SUs around local governance and decision making. And we would look to better leverage BOCES for things like special ed programming. Looking at, larger contracted services for transportation and maybe getting better value on those types of bids. Maybe some more bulk purchasing, certainly more regional professional development. And I think about instructional materials, if some of us are utilizing some of the same instructional materials, leveraging the BOCES to better get value to purchase those things. The problem was, so that is the report moving forward on the task force. The governor made it really clear the next day that they didn't fulfill their obligation to create new consolidated school districts, and that he was encouraging leadership in the House and Senate to replace those task force members. He doesn't have the ability to replace them. He only has one task force member that he but then really doubled down later last week in regards to finally saying that we need larger supervisory districts in order to close small schools and reduce FTE. At least the elephant in the room was finally stated, right? Like anytime I testified to Senate Ed or House Ed, I consistently said that this was about creating larger supervisory districts so that the boards depersonalize to make it easier to close schools. I believe that. And finally, the governor stated that publicly. So I think what you're gonna see is that the 5 district map's gonna come back to the floor again. The other interesting thing on the last task force meeting was Secretary Saunders was really clear that she was not supportive of the CTE map because it included SUs, that there needed to be supervisory districts. And that choice could be taken care of via policy, like we're talking a bit here tonight, but that policy would create opportunities for kids to access public and independent schools.
I have not read whatever is on we got an email in the last couple of days, so it's maybe a redundant question, but I was listening to Vermont Public Radio, and they interviewed Scott, and Scott said he was thinking of reconstituting the committee because they hadn't done their job. Is that a threat, or is that, is it just trying to be threatening, or is he gonna start from scratch again?
Well,
Or do we know?
legislation requires them to have a report by December 1st.
Right.
And he doesn't have the ability, this is what I was saying, he only got to provide one member to the committee. So it would require the Senate leadership and House leadership to come together to decide they wanted to reappoint task force members. And so what I was getting to, I think, the biggest thing that we have in front of us at the legislative session are the leaders in the House and Senate going to get behind and support some type of map to come to the floor? Or are they going to oppose and say we need to slow down and relook at the bill and try to get this right based on feedback that we're gathering from our communities? Because if you look at all the public comment that's been received by the task force, it is all anti-larger merged districts and the loss of their local schools. But here's the other big piece to this, is that there is a bit of a carrot and stick at play here as we come into talking to your budget as well, is that the governor and legislature utilize one-time funds to help to provide revenue into the ed fund, which was one-time money. And so if that money is not replaced, the yield's going to drop. And remember, when your yield drops, tax rates go up. I think the figures based on what they provided to the ed fund last year could be as much as 9 cents. So it is, What we're looking at in front of you tonight is a budget increase that I've never presented you, one at this level before since I've been sued. And we talked about it, but when you look at what we're presenting, it's over $1 million increase. And that's 11 cents. The yield itself could be 9. You see what I'm saying? So, and for every penny that yield might increase our local tax rate, we would need to cut from what's in here tonight, $95,587.47 or increase revenue. It takes essentially $96,000 in increased revenue or decreased expenditures for us to get at a penny. And so if that decision around this yield number ends up adding 9 cents to us, we're not gonna be able to make up that level of shortfall. Okay? And so, you know, as we look forward, the carrot is if you do the bill, we can find some additional revenue to help pay down that a bit. Again, legislature, right? Or you decide you don't want to do this leadership in Senate and House, then what we're going to start hearing is, which is what we heard 2 years ago, is budgets are out of control, taxes are going up 15%, Vermonters can't afford it. So, you know, with that said, I want you to know as we go into your budgeting, I'll review with you what this budget, these proposals actually have in regards to personnel, but we have a lot of work to do budget-wise between now and the middle of January. And I say that to you to say, like, I know that we have a lot of work to do. And so the outlook in regards to what's going to happen with the legislature, I think is a perfect storm of what we saw when Act 127 came out with those 5% equalized tax rate caps, of which Ed and Peggy and Nancy were part of. Julie, you came in right after that, I think. That was a really difficult time, if you remember. We had to we had to approve the budget incredibly late because that yield number was moving all over, and they changed the bill right at the start of the session to remove that cap. So, you know, what I would say to you is we'll get a lot more information come December 1 in the December 1 tax letter, which is going to relate to Act 73. That tax letter, I believe, will be incredibly doom and gloom in regards to the yield number. The hopes being that as they work through the session, that yield number ends up coming back up. Remember, when the yield number increases, taxes go down. And that hopefully we can gain momentum. And I think Senate Ed, this is why they're doing their listening tour around how can we re-envision the state to increase accountability and incentivize possibly mergers. I know this sounds a lot like Act 46 again, I know. To move the system forward, to encourage people to try to work together, right? Like, I think we've had some decent positive conversations with neighbors that could result in some better efficiencies possibly in savings. I think that is way better than these mega districts that I believe are gonna quickly and swiftly result in.
Status Trey, time 8:04
I don't know
PM.
what I just,
Battery
sorry.
95%.
I don't know how to make it stop.
Some pretty big changes to our educational system, of which, frankly, I really worry about. The biggest impact being on kids is that a lot of our educators in the state say, I did Act 46, I did COVID, I'm not doing this again. And I mean, I'll admit, there's times I say to myself, I don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
As an educator that loves the work I do. And so, you know, to be determined, but the next 7 months are going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
So on the 17th, we're going to be hosting Senate Ed, of which I think are really open-minded that maps don't need to be the solution. Frankly, I thought they were the most open-minded about that the entire time, meaning they're the ones that allowed for this vote to be in the bill because the proposal of the House already had this happening. There was no off-ramp. They gave us the off-ramp, which is what we're still talking about. And so I think it's really important that we try to get as many people out as possible to talk about why they're concerned about these mega districts and why they're concerned about local democracy having a say in it, right? Like, and I would say that the districts that work to create a plan and template around how to like vision themselves forward, these mergers have worked. White River Unified District, if we look at your tax rates over the last 5 years, like in general, we've kept them flat or they've gone up very little compared to the state. But you reimagine how you did work as a district. Districts that are in the SU who got forced to merge at the last minute, who didn't have a roadmap, have really struggled and they haven't really seen any tax savings. Meaning, we have examples, even within our SU, of forced mergers, didn't really get to envision it because it had to happen, versus districts that came together and had a vision. Like it's a night and day difference when I look at opportunities and what it did for tax rates. And so I just think we got to really emphasize that in regards to the approach. So not to be too doom and gloom, but you know, the RSC, I had to call Margaret to clean up. I think a bunch of you were on Margaret's emails. I love Margaret, but she said, oh, this was a big hit. And I said, Margaret, no, it was just, they didn't put a map forward, but it doesn't mean it's over. I think we're really at the start.
It was sort of discouraging to see, or at least my read of the situation, to see them come forward and say, look, we went around, we talked to everybody, we don't think it's realistic, here's a better idea. And we said, well, that's not a map, so the meeting's over. And I kind of, that was hard to sort of witness. I wasn't even in the room, but.
They're still going to issue a report with their research, and we'll see what the legislature does.
But it was kind of nice, I will say, because it did seem like a pretty direct result of not just our conversation, there's plenty of other conversations, but having seen us literally sharing with them at the wagon wheel meeting, and seeing a result from that is pretty empowering, even if it wasn't just us.
I really appreciate that, David. I think they went in there as a task force believing they were going to deliver on at least 2, if not 3 maps.
Right.
That made sense and could be done. I think as they dug into the research and the public comment and traveled across the state, they realized it is a complex system and trying to solve it in 7 meetings wasn't going to happen.
It was an impossible task right from the start. Okay, back to the agenda. Draft 2 of the student support budget.
So what you have here is so one big change is, and this is good news, is that we were having a placeholder for health insurance of 18%, which our sense was it was high, but we'd rather go high or lower. That has now come down to a 8% placeholder based on, what we're receiving in regards to VHI, in regards to putting forward a 7.4 to 7.6% increase, depending on the plan that you have. That doesn't get approved until January, just so you know. So we're still holding 8. Hopefully that can come down even a little more, right? So that's the first time in 6 years it hasn't been double digits. So that's good. Otherwise, in student support, you get the same FTE that you had last month, other than a 4th principal added. And so you see that big change up at the top. That's not the full 207, of course, right? But it's a significant chunk of it because we're budgeting salary and assuming full family plan health benefits. And full family plan health benefits, just so you know, is over 40,000 for any of our employees right now. And so that's also why when you go to the regular ed para, And you see that significant increase there. It's the fifth line down in that student support budget. Again, I'm not okay budgeting for an employee we don't know and not budgeting a family plan, because quickly that can get us into trouble in regards to not being able to make up that type of difference. And you may say, well, what's the difference between a single plan versus family? It's significant. A single plan right now is like 8,600 versus a family, which would be, about 40,000. So I'd much prefer that we just budget on the family plan side, and we adjust for actuals once we hire somebody.
So I think I don't know if now's the time for discussion on that. I'm not advocating for, I certainly see the benefit. I can only imagine. The schools aren't that close together. There's different staff. We've got two, from what I would think immediately and did and still do, you've got two full sets of teachers, it's a whole staff for each school. So I see it as a benefit, but as kind of a big but. I think if we were to put that forward, we're going to have a lot of questions, rightfully so. And I think if we were going to go there, we would certainly need to have a really strong case to be able to present to people, because that's not going to go unnoticed. That's just my 2 cents. But again, I see the benefit. I just don't know how well I could explain that to who I'm sure will be coming to ask about it.
Yeah, and I will say, there was talks about needing to reduce it in administration even before I arrived, having lived here as a taxpayer at that point, before we had budget issues, and we're in a deficit spend position. I think I more so wanted to engage in this conversation to say, even as a district, and I'm not asking us to do this right now, but is it worth saying, we actually believe that we need a fourth principal, how we're currently constructed? Is this something the community would want to engage in possibly looking down the road around reimagining how the structure of the district looks, knowing that example of which was discussed prior to that community engagement, if you had a unified elementary and a middle high school on one campus, one principal on one campus could do the job quite well. And we never dug into, in regards to the community engagement task force, I don't believe what that actually might even mean in FTEs. We really talked about it through a data lens, but I don't think we ever got to what would it actually mean in regards to actually could there be savings even in a model like that around efficiency. We haven't dug into that either, but that is something the board may want to look at as we move forward. I'm not saying for next year, right? But is it something we want to start to talk about in backwards design to at least allow the community to have some type of possible conversation and vote about next fall as we go into down the road? And of course, Act 73 could become law and then it's a movement. But I say it to you to say that way, it's just something worthwhile to talk about. If we can't afford a fourth principal, does that mean we just need to continue to look at how we have structured ourselves?
There's a lot of questions that kind of go into that, and I was already kind of thinking about that and the discussion that might come out of that. Because I might say, well, what next purpose? Why do we have two principals? That might be sort of the pushback that we were to get, combine them. One immediate question that I have, because of facilities, is I don't actually know the difference really between a middle school campus classroom-wise. Is it fair to say that there's not a huge difference and we wouldn't be looking at massive building needs because of that? Because I'm thinking in terms of so there's two gyms at that elementary, high school and South Bluffton. You have one gym here. Is that enough to service? I would imagine, that combined class sizes for the elementary.
We never got, so I would love to be able to dig into that, but I don't think the community engagement task force ever got to a place to allow for that type of real digging in that.
No.
It could be a really meaningful exercise though. I appreciate what you're saying of backward engineering that and to say like, we're already prepared for this scenario. If you do want to be part of that discussion, we were already thinking of it. Let's figure this out. That said, I'm not against the two principal solution because it's expensive, but simpler at the moment because of how we are structured.
I was wondering about the possibility of if there were the two principals, could there be not exactly split teaching principal, but perhaps each of those principals could pick up one class or something as part of it, because that would alleviate some of that extra cost if, I mean, yeah. I just remember hearing that when Andra was an elementary school. I mean, there were still people in this community that talk about when you were teaching here before you ever became a principal and how upset they were that you were no longer teaching because you were such a fantastic teacher. So like maybe you could teach.
Would that be realistic for elementary though? Because the elementary typically, it's not structured where you have all of your 6th period.
No,
teach, you know, just for that
but
one.
there are,
Where I've seen that shared position work in the past is like, when I've seen it in the past, what I've seen, and not even schools your size though, right, smaller than you, is like principal interventionist or principal school counselor. The issue is, in the principal world, a crisis comes up and then you're not available to teach. And I can even just base this on when I was the principal at Williamstown, I taught pre-K PE because it was my introduction to my pre-K students. I loved it, right? There's what better way to get to know your principal than he teaches you PE? And I was licensed in PE. But even then, it was amazing how many times something would be blowing up. And I'd be saying to my admin assistant, Diane, we got to find coverage. And she'd be like, are you kidding me? You know, and then she's down there trying to cover for me type of thing, right? So that's my only worry.
yeah.
Would the teacher's contract allow for principals to be teachers?
Yeah, that would allow for it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
I've been in the schools recently doing some covering for the principals, subbing, and I can actually contribute to this in saying that I spent time watching all three, and I believe all three really do need the ability to pivot, and to have something locked in like that would be difficult. I mean, they can speak for themselves, but all three need the ability to pivot, and having something like that would be difficult because they need to be able to go where they're needed when they're needed. So
I do think though, merging the elementaries would have real savings that we haven't really. You know, yeah, you could put the principal in teaching, but I also think, I don't know that you need 2 school counselors necessarily. I think you probably need 1 school counselor. I think there would be less savings.
I mean, since we merged, I have always been in favor of a unified elementary district. I always thought it made much more sense, but that was the way to get the merger passed, was to have them separate.
Right, and the other question too would be, you know, the impact we keep talking about losing elementary schools, in general, and with everything else that's happened, Act 73, I mean, if we're looking at South Burlington campus as sort of, hopefully an anchor should the worst case scenario happen. If we're combining, if we did, I mean, this is not a thing we're gonna do next month anyways, but point being, if this became our elementary school, you know, our RUDB elementary school, do we lose that because it's Bethel and we're hitched to something else because of whatever the map says that does get drawn? So I would have that concern. I think I already do, but then when you're saying, okay, this is not just an elementary school, this is also our middle school. If we then had a middle high school and all of our elementary here, we also wouldn't have the I don't think the same ability to argue, but I mean, at least the elementary school would be bigger, so that could. Anyway, I think there's a lot to discuss there.
Okay.
So the bottom half is easier. Right now, it's status quo staffing based on what you currently have in your general ed budget, okay? You'll see performing arts, that increase of 0.6 is actually an addition that we made this current year based on scheduling and request of the performing arts department, and we weren't able to solidify a world language teacher. So just know, you currently have 3.6 FTE in performing arts as currently staffed. Doesn't mean we couldn't change that during the budget session. The principals can speak to how that's working or not working, but right now, when you see that increase of 0.6 or that decrease of 0.1, those are your actuals as currently staffed. We didn't tweak anything. One of the things the principals, Tara and I will be doing in the coming, between now and your December budget, when you get your full budget, is we need to analyze, and one of the areas that I have the most concerned about, and Shane knows this, and he's talked to his leadership team, is I'm really concerned about our compliance with minimum class sizes at the high school level of 18 in the core content areas. And I'm not telling you I think we can get there year one. I think it would create too much havoc possibly on your system. But I at least want you to have a much better sense of where we're currently at, what the budget looks like you'll be at next year. I don't want to come to you 2 years from now and say, hey, we haven't been in compliance, and I'm really worried that the Secretary of Ed is going to go to the state board and say, we should close the White River Valley High School. I want you to have eyes wide open on where we're at around this.
How far out from compliance is the worry, or we don't really know, I guess?
Shane has a better sense than I do in regards to walking through halls, but I'm not seeing 18 kids in the majority of your core.
That's what I meant, is there one core where you go, well, we don't have a way to, whatever.
You know, it varies. So there are some classes that do have 20 students in it. Fine, and there are others that are, 10 to 12. Some that are even smaller than that, particularly when we look at trying to offer a wide variety and high-level courses. We're running some high-level math classes with 2-3 students in it.
AP doesn't count, right? They removed that. So what we will do is we'll sit down with our data department and I'll pull together each department and show you on average what the cohort size is. And you'll have that with your budget in December.
So then certainly all of our tuition students have not overwhelmed us.
No, we have capacity.
Yeah, we have a lot more capacity. Okay.
What is the middle school looking like for their core classes? I don't remember what they said for the requirement for minimum class size, but how does the middle school?
Much closer in the middle school. It's 15, and we're much closer in regards to core content classes.
Yeah,
And that speaks well to the future high school classes, that doesn't. If we're that close to a 15 mark, and then you're
We're
talking.
more heavily staffed at the high school.
Oh, okay.
and there's not as many choices in the middle school.
Right.
So,
Is there there's a lot to that. Is there a way that if some of those more, like with the example of the advanced math classes, if they're not heavy on instruction, is there a way to combine some of those more specialty math courses? So like if you had calculus 2 and calculus 3, could they?
This is where our flexible pathways program is really a strength and an opportunity to try to right size and meet those needs without, running very small classes. So we're continuing to work through that and learn each time we create an independent study or have a new situation that comes up that just challenges all to think outside the box and come up with a new solution. So.
But what I'm saying with this is, if we come forward, we may show you, here's where we're at, here's year one and what that means, but eventually and this is what the state's trying to do with these minimum class sizes, they're looking for reduction in force. Okay, okay? So I just want to put that elephant out there. That's what it's about. And so what we'll say to you is, here are some reductions we need to, I just did this in the elementary district. Last month, I said, we gotta go to multi-age to start to try to comply. In order to do that, that is a reduction of 1 FTE. And then year 2, we will try to comply in the upper elementary, and that's gonna be another reduction of 1 FTE. But that's what it means. So just know, as we talk to you about some reductions in force, and we'll be looking at our elementary sizes too, to just make certain we're in compliance. I think what I'm gonna say to you is, here's where we're at, here's what a year 1 we might recommend, knowing that we may not be in compliance until year 2 or 3. And it's an average over 3 years, and if we get into compliance, I think we have a much better case with the state board versus we just didn't do anything, right?
I think we should make these kids take upper level math classes to beef up those classes.
There is some rigor there. That's good, I like to hear that.
Okay, universal instruction budget.
That's what we just did.
That's what that is, okay, good. Action, possible action.
Well, do you want to circle back,
Oh, yeah, Tara,
Tara?
yeah, hi.
You know, you,
So you have my report. It outlines the reports that were due out of the business office for the month of November. I think that was it. That was on my report. We just talked about your budget. So if there's any specific questions, happy to answer.
Can I have one thing under Tara's report, just because we didn't have another agenda item on it? Sorry. Just the facility task force met with EEI at the end of last month. I have another phone call with Eric from EEI tomorrow. He's supposed to be getting us some figures. The facility task force will meet again here in the next week or so. The idea is to bring you a proposal to possibly act on in December at your regular meeting. Okay?
Great.
That's in alignment of what we discussed during the retreat. I think Peggy and Dave would say there's been no surprises thus far.
Any questions for Tara?
thank you for coming in.
Yeah. How'd the playground go?
Table.
I told him that I didn't know how late you'd be with playground talk.
It's a very, very detailed conversation.
We're back to public comment, but we don't have any public. Okay, no public, okay. New hires, resignations, anything happening yet?
Did we not talk about the action or possible action?
Oh,
We didn't have any.
Oh, okay.
yeah. So no new hires, no resignations, that's good. Next, we are going into executive session. So I need a motion for that, correct?
Yep, to discuss
Okay.
real estate.
Okay,
Motion to leave executive session?
okay. Do we have any other business? Future agenda items,
Budget draft 3.
We got budget,
facilities,
facilities.
okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.